In this video, we're going to go in depth talking about how we override the initial position of points. In Select Series 2, we utilize point controls, we utilize targeting of drafting standards, styles, and we also utilize targeting alignments and end conditions. Those are just some examples. And so what I want to do is some comparative analysis of how those relate to each other in Select Series 2 versus Select Series 3. So this particular video is more of a training on the comparisons, and then the final video will be actually correcting the model. So in Select Series 2, taking a look first at the targeting of a style constraint. For example, I'm looking at this particular corridor, and on one of the template drops, you can see that it has a style constraint target of EOP underscore new. Now, if we jump back over to Select Series 3, what I've done is isolated my levels, and I have shown the edge of pavement here that is drawn in the plan graphics file, which we imported in a previous video, and I've shown the actual model pavement surface, and you can see that the two do not coincide. And if I take a look, for example, at editing of this template drop, and I look at the edge of pavement, what you'll notice is we do still have this horizontal feature constraint, but notice it's called something different now. It's not called a style constraint, it's called a horizontal feature constraint, but the actual content is new. And so that is a comparison of Select Series 2 and Select Series 3. So in Select Series 2, this would automatically pick up this edge of pavement new and draw accordingly. But we've had a behavioral change in Select Series 3 for a very good reason. In Select Series 3, if we want an entity to be recognized as a target when we're targeting this horizontal feature constraint, we have to add that as a corridor reference. We do this because in the past we've had a lot of customer requests in terms of a line perhaps between multiple corridors getting picked up by the wrong corridor because of the search distance settings. And so what we've done now is we're asking the user to add it as a reference before it will be seen. And so to do this, I simply click on the corridor, and underneath our corridor references, we simply say add a corridor reference. And then I simply just touch the edge of pavement by selecting it. And if I can do multiple ones here, if I want to do the other side over here, I can do that as well. I select that one. And then when I'm complete, I just do a right mouse click to reset. And then the corridor will reprocess, and you will see those edges of pavement now followed. So you can see the updated edges of pavement now look correct on this particular corridor. And so that'll be one of the exercises we would have to complete in our model for every corridor in our project that we've imported. Another comparison between Select Series 2 and Select Series 3 is what we can do with end conditions. A common thing that happens with our end conditions in Select Series 2 is that we can target something other than our active surface. And in particular, one of the common aspects, or one of the common things that we see with Select Series 2 is we targeting of the alignment X, Y, and Z, where we have a horizontal alignment name and a vertical alignment name. This will have to be added as well in the target aliasing application in Select Series 3. This will not come across automatically, but we will be able to take advantage of it. So in Select Series 3, I'm going to focus on an area here along ramp 2, and you can see that our slopes can't find the profile, and we need to fix that. And so we come over here to our corridor on ramp 2, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deactivate the corridor rule because I need to make more than one change, and so I don't want to see the corridor process after every single change. So I'm going to deactivate the corridor rule for just a minute. And now with the corridor deactivated, the next thing we want to do is we want to add this alignment as a reference to the corridor. So if we want an end condition to target an alignment both in the horizontal and the vertical direction, there are two requirements. One is to add it as a corridor reference, and secondly then is to enable the profile portion in target aliasing. So let's go ahead and add this line as a reference. To do this, we select our ramp 2 corridor in this example, and we go down and select Add Corridor Reference, and then we're going to locate this alignment, FS113RT, and then we reset to complete. And now that that's added as a reference to the corridor, we can proceed then to add that profile as a target in our target aliasing. Then I'm going to come back over to target aliasing, and I'm going to add in the targets for those end conditions that we saw in Select Series 2. To do this, initially it may look rather intimidating, but all you have to do is go define your target, and you should see the targets listed from that particular corridor here. And so the first one is this one, which is right here, and we add that as a target. Then we go down to our next one, our right ditch, and we find that profile and we add that, and we say okay. Now this is not going to process at this time because we have our rule turned off. So all we do now is we select our corridor again, we activate our corridor rule, and then we select our corridor, and then we tell it to process the corridor. And when this processes, it's going to pick up those vertical profile elements that we were targeting in Select Series 2. So now you will see that our end conditions target the profile properly and no longer go down to a 0 elevation. The last type of controlling of points we want to talk about, going back to Select Series 2, is point controls. We have multiple types of point controls. We have the ability to target an alignment, a feature, a style, or a corridor point, and if we were having vertical only super elevation. The super elevation comes across just fine. There's nothing to do for super elevation. The alignments will come across just fine without any extra work. The only one that would require additional information in Select Series 3 after the import is if we targeted a feature, which is generally not too common with the Geopack customers. Sometimes the En-ROADS customers will target features in their terrain models. Or we also can target styles here, but we learned earlier how we would target styles in the template itself, which is typically what users do instead of doing it through point controls. But if you were to target a style in Select Series 2 through point controls, you would still have to add that as a reference to the corridor in Select Series 3, which we already covered. And then lastly, we can target a point in another corridor, and again, that will come across okay without any additional effort in terms of Select Series 3 after the import process. So the primary thing that we've learned here in this video is in Select Series 3, if a template point targets a drafting style in Select Series 2, in Select Series 3 it will be set up, but we will have to go add in those particular entities as a reference to the corridor before it will process. Secondly, if an end condition is targeting something other than the active surface, we have to go back to that particular corridor in Select Series 3 and add that as a target alias for it to be recognized, particularly with the vertical profiles. It will see the horizontal alignments okay, but the profile will need to be manually added as a target alias. And then lastly, if in point controls we are targeting a style, we would just need to also remember that we would have to add that as a reference to the corridor. The corridor points and the alignments set up as point controls in Select Series 2, as well as super elevation point controls, would all come across without any additional effort in Select Series 3. So in the next video, we're going to finalize our model looking at these particular exercises that we've covered in this video and shown the comparisons between Select Series 2 and Select Series 3. And then the last video will show us how to fine-tune that model and make those final adjustments.